morning, everyone. It's so great to see you again today, here for our first inaugural Clean Energy Buyers Institute Day. And I am honored to follow that really exciting announcement with a panel that's going to help exemplify what this future could look like. So, panelists, come on out and join me on stage.
Please welcome Michigan Public Service Commissioner Tremaine Phillips, Walker Miller Energy Services CIO, Dr. Brandy Brown, and General Motors Senior Manager of Climate Equity Fund and Disaster Relief, Jessica James.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't know, hopefully you're all excited as I am to see this commitment and opportunity that we have now to really take these amazing ideas and thoughts we have about the principles of Beyond the Megawatt and make them real. And this group here is actively doing that every day, both in Michigan and beyond. And so I can't think of a better panel to help us really now talk about how do we make this happen and what practices are we seeing. So I'd invite you each, and Dr. Brown, maybe we can start with you, to introduce yourself. Tell us what brings you here today, and what is your vision for this equitable clean energy future?
Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Brandy Brown. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Walker Miller, and that's a really exciting position for me to have because every day I get to innovate and find new solutions of how we drive decarbonization, clean energy, and get it in the hands and the communities of communities who haven't been able to access some of the infrastructure investments over the last few generations. So what brings me here today is seeing all of you having this wonderful discussion and trying to create more solutions in the future.
Wonderful, welcome.
Hi everyone,
Jessica.
I'm Jessica James, Senior Manager for the Climate Equity Fund and Disaster Relief at General Motors. Really excited to be here today to talk about the clean energy future because in 2021, GM made some bold goals of its own around sustainability. And when we were working on those goals behind the scenes, we knew that we really, it was imperative that we did more and that we thought about the people and how we achieve our goals, not just achieving them, right? Making sure we're able to bring everybody along on that journey. And my vision for a clean energy future is the same one that I have for a future electric vehicle, world, which is that everybody has a chance to benefit, participate, and enjoy, the fruits of that transition, and that we achieve those goals by bringing everybody in. So, thank you.
Welcome. Commissioner Phillips, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Why I'm here, I will never pass up an opportunity to come to the great city of Detroit. So I thank all of you. I know how challenging it is to travel and to not just take the option to participate remotely. So I thank you for coming to this great city and enjoying everything that we have to offer here. The Michigan Public Service Commission, we are the chief regulatory body for the regulation of the electricity, natural gas, and telecommunications industries in the state of Michigan. And one thing that I wanted to make sure to let you all know and understand is that since 2019, we've been engaged in an effort called My Power Grid, which is really about understanding how the commission from our jurisdiction as a regulatory authority in the state of Michigan can help to best facilitate, prepare for, and in some ways, get the hell out of the way of the clean energy transition. And so that has just been incredibly important in terms of engaging utilities, stakeholders, the private sector, and understanding what our role is in terms of facilitating clean energy deployment. But the other aspect of that conversation is about ensuring that we are maximizing the clean energy transition, maximizing the benefits for all residents in the state of Michigan, for all ratepayers in the state of Michigan, and not making the assumption that the clean energy transition will benefit all ratepayers, benefit all residents equally. We have to be very intentional in that aspect, and that's been a really critical core element of the My Power Grid initiative, as well as just the work at the commission generally.
Well, very well said. I think that get the hell out of the way statement kind of triggered a question I'd love to ask all of you, which is, what are these barriers? What are you seeing? Because I think others in this room probably have a similar vision to you or adjacent visions. And what do you think some of the barriers are to us getting there today that you're currently seeing? Do you want to start, build off your last statement?
Yeah, there are really three specific barriers that we're seeing at present, and I think a lot of you are aware of these, are facing these challenges as well. Certainly one is in regards to the supply chain dynamics, with first initiated through the 2020 pandemic, exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then further inflamed by the resurgence of COVID-19 in China. These are all causing, we're seeing the implications on solar PPAs and other elements and components of the supply chain for many other renewable energy technologies. We are seeing the implications of that today. We just heard a presentation earlier this week that there are thousands of megawatts of solar that is being held up in the queue within MISO, our regional electricity market, that's being held up because of those supply chain dynamics. Another thing that we're seeing is siting. In Michigan, it is very difficult right now to site new commercial scale wind. And that is beginning to bleed over to commercial scale solar as well. So there certainly needs to be better discussion with those local counties, those local communities, to understand how we can meet their needs and address their justified concerns so that we can ensure that we can deploy that commercial scale capacity and reach those ambitious decarbonization goals that I know we all have.
Would either of you like to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I can weigh in. So the main barriers that we're seeing and focusing on have to do with people. When we think about any solution that we've deployed across the centuries that was good for society, we really saw the benefit when the most people were able to access that in some form or fashion. And right now with clean energy, there's a few different chasms and gaps. The one we think about most often is access. But if you dig down into access, you understand there is a lack of awareness that happens when you're not in the energy space and you don't understand what's going on. We're talking in our jargon, we're not making it plain for people. When I talk to my neighbors, they have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. And I have to, try to make it something that's valuable for them. So we still have work to do internally to figure out how we just get it plain for people. The second thing is when we think about deploying these resources across the country and in the state of Michigan, when I was at the state, we were looking to businesses to deploy first because you have the resources, you're most close to being able to buy down the price of some of these solutions. Residents aren't. If you look at our housing stock across the state, we have a lot of work to do to get a lot of our homes up to code. If you look at some of the communities where they have not had investment, maybe they're having trouble finding a job, or maybe they're just trying to make ends meet. They do not have time to think about how they can access these clean energy solutions, how they can be part of that. When I think back to when I was a single mom and I only had $600, the last thing on my mind was thinking about how I was going to pay that electricity bill, let alone how could I get solar or a heat pump. That it was nowhere on my radar. So when I talk to people in my communities here in Detroit, when I talk to folks back in Kalamazoo, none of the people I go home to are thinking about these solutions. And so every day I go to work and I try to think, how can we get closer to them so this is accessible, so this is something that they understand the value of, that this is something that makes their lives better. So, we haven't figured it out yet, but we know that the first step to overcoming that barrier is to continue these partnerships and to work together.
Yeah, and I'll add, I agree with both sets of comments. I think one of the other barriers is just the need for speed that we all have to make this transition. And I think we all recognize what happens when you're trying to move so fast and address such a serious problem. It can be really easy to rationalize, leaving certain parts of the equity conversation out of the process, whether it's in the name of a bigger goal, which is obviously addressing climate change, or because of the pressures that we feel inside corporations to move fast and be as efficient as possible. And I think what I found working directly with community-based organizations across many different climate topics, including renewable energy, is that we shouldn't make assumptions about what community-based organizations and community members want or need, or how quickly they're willing to come to the table and engage and be a part of solution making. I heard someone say last week, those people closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And in a lot of ways, that can probably speed things up if we're willing to open our minds and reach out and be vulnerable and admit what we don't know. And I think that's how we address this transition without the consequences of the first time we went about, bringing electricity infrastructure or personal mobility to the world. We have an opportunity right now, and we're right in the middle of it, to say, hold on, we're gonna move fast, and we're gonna make sure everybody can come with us and everyone can benefit, and we're gonna reach down and we're gonna meet people where they are to bring them into that process. And I think finding the time and getting everybody internally on the same page around that goal is certainly a barrier, considering the ultimate challenge we're all facing.
Jessica, let's build on that a little more. Those are really sage words. Could you share a little bit more about what successes you've seen, what recommendations you would make for those who are beginning their clean energy journey to think about equity?
Yeah, I think, I'm in the philanthropy space, and so I'm not directly involved in energy procurement. But at the end of the day, I see a common recipe for success when I see projects that come to life and that are unique and groundbreaking. And I heard it backstage, collaboration. And the players that we see are corporations, utilities, local government, community voices, nonprofits and or NGOs in your region. And again, the recipe for success that I see when programs come out the other end successful and groundbreaking are that everybody had a chance early on to inform that process. And also, I think, prioritizing a shared goal. I think their equity is, where do you start talking about the different equity concerns as it relates to climate or clean energy? There's a million things you could focus on. And so as corporate buyers, I would encourage you to think about your values as an organization and the role you play in the economy, and think about what type of goal would give you the opportunity to bring something unique to the table for that community or that set of stakeholders, and pick a specific goal and work toward that. I think when we say we're going to address equity, we leave the conversation so big that you can't tackle it, and you have to educate yourself and your team and other stakeholders about what is that specific equity goal you're trying to tackle in this project, and that will open up a lot of doors for questions and answers and progress.
Yeah, and to kind of riff off your point, Jessica, you have to, in digging into the equity, you have to operationalize it. You have to understand what that means. So we break down equity in a few different criteria, and we measure what that access looks like. The access to the technologies, the solutions, the decision makers, the benefits. Are they getting benefits of clean air, energy, all those things? Are they getting benefits of being able to build wealth? Are the taxes going back into the community? Participation, are they able to participate fully? Can they engage in the decision-making process and have their voices heard? And finally, representativeness. Is the project we're doing, is it representative of the community that we're working in? Or are we just replicating ourselves in this project? So that's kind of some of the way that we operationalize equity. But going back to the successes, one of the biggest successes I've seen in the last few years is the movement in the conversation that we're having here, and that we're actually talking about equity. I remember over a decade ago when I entered energy, the only person I heard talking about equity was Carla Walker-Miller, the founder of Walker-Miller Energy Services. And she's been pushing on that for years. And a few years ago, she started talking about the concept of actually investing in equity, and specifically that you have to budget for equity. And she's pushed on leaders here in the state, in the region, and at the federal level to budget for equity and think about how much does this cost to actually reach these people? How much time does that cost? And you mentioned, Jessica, in our previous conversations and then a little bit earlier that in our quest for efficiency, sometimes we forget that. So taking the time to slow down and think about what that cost is and weave it in now, as Jessica said, is really important.
Tremaine, Commissioner Phillips, could you share a little bit more about what are you seeing in the state of Michigan today, and what's the direction you see the state going?
Well, one thing I just want to quickly mention, it's kind of an ethos that we're carrying into each of these conversations, particularly at this point in time where we have potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in federal infrastructure investment coming to the state of Michigan and being deployed across the country. But it's this ethos that about being very intentional about the impacts and implications of that investment, that the decisions that we're making right now to deploy infrastructure related to the clean energy transition, this will be infrastructure that is in our communities, in our neighborhoods, along our highways and roadways for decades, maybe centuries. And that if we look back in our history, if we look back at our highway infrastructure, railroads, water system, our housing built environment, that historic and systemic discrimination and inequality has embedded itself in all aspects of that infrastructure. Right now, as we sit here in the RINSEN, Jefferson, which is the road right outside of this building, to get off of 75 and to get onto Jefferson, you take Interstate 375. A lot of you took that to get here and didn't notice. But that interstate, when it was constructed in the 1950s, was built through a historically black neighborhood called Black Bottom. It was a black and vibrant neighborhood in that community that was almost entirely destroyed due to the construction of that interstate project. And there are many stories like this throughout metropolitan regions throughout the country. But I just continue to think of those examples because we just have to be very intentional and not be naive to think that the deployment of the infrastructure related to the clean energy transition, that we won't, without intentionality, perpetuate the same inequalities and discrimination that is embedded in the infrastructure of the last century. And we just have to be very intentional and work with local communities and stakeholders in order to prevent that from happening once again.
Great. Dr. Brown, I know you shared with me a little earlier about some ways that you look at data to help make decisions. I think this is an audience full of energy customers, energy providers, service providers, and you talked about getting tangible, operational. Could you share some of the tools and approaches that you have used that are successful or help you along this very intentional path to decision making?
So I mentioned a few criteria earlier, and I'll repeat those: access, benefits, participation, engagement, and we add representativeness on there. Now, those tools are the energy justice tools that Dr. Shalonda Baker, who now leads the Office of Environmental Justice at the DOE, put forth in her work. And what we did is just add a measurement aspect on that. So we have, for you data nerds out there, just put a basic Likert scale on it for 1 to 5, and then put a value on that. So what we do now when we do evaluations of our energy programs, that can be energy efficiency, demand response, anything, along with our mobility programs, is we evaluate our programs as they're ongoing. We evaluate our processes, and we share that with our clients and our customers. And we share that quite openly because the purpose of this is for all of us to learn and get better and recognize that this is an ongoing effort. So what that caused our clients to have to do with their projects is to actually begin measuring when they're talking to their customers, when they're looking at the communities, measuring the community's perception of whether or not they had a voice in decision making, their perception on whether or not they knew how and where to participate, and if they had the tools to do that. So to break that down a little bit, we run some workforce development programs. Some of them focus on BPI training. And one of the things we implemented as a result of surveying the Detroit community is that although we were offering this BPI training for free, and we were extending it out instead of a quick hit and very intense course, we were extending it out over 6 to 8 weeks. That even though we did that, that was not enough to bridge an equity gap. So we had to take a look internally and see what else can we do, what other problems are there. And we realized that some of the people we were trying to pull into the clean energy economy through workforce participation needed things like childcare, that there was no childcare in their community for them to take their children to and know that their children were safe and fed and taken care of. So we had to then put childcare. Some of them did not have transportation. 30% of Detroit residents do not have access to a car for transportation. And we have a lot of work to do here with our regional transit, so it was difficult for them to get to the site. So we offered things like Uber vouchers or figuring out how to get them to the site. So thinking about all those things, are they well fed? Are they rested? We had to figure out how to pay them through training so that they could continue on their lives and actually have the capacity to think about what opportunities lie ahead.
So before we depart, this is a quick fireside chat, unfortunately. I would love to hear from each of you as a closing message, really as we think of the power of this community as an energy customer-driven clean energy transition. What is the role that you see for these energy customers in this transition? What message would you leave them with as you go away today? Commissioner?
I was reflecting back on this with a former colleague last week, but it was incredible. In 2008, there were 8 proposed new coal-fired power plants here in the state of Michigan. Not 8 units, but 8 distinct, separate proposed coal-fired power plants. And none of those plants were constructed. Many plants were not constructed across the country during that similar time period. And there are a number of reasons why that is. It was the community, the environmental justice and environmental community, the activists and advocacy pressure that prevented those facilities from being built. It was the investment community no longer financing coal in particular. And it also was the demand. It was the demand for greener, cleaner electrons to corporations, to companies. It was the group in this room saying that you wanted greener and cleaner electrons to turn the lights on in your stores or to power your manufacturing or to keep your data centers cool. That demand was kind of the final leg in the stool that really helped to erode and evaporate what was this surge in building out coal capacity at that time. So I say that just to really emphasize the important role that you all play, the important role that you all play in terms of pressuring your utilities to continue to go along a path of decarbonization and greening the grid so that you have those clean and green electrons to pull from, are the role that you all play in procuring and acquiring your own distributed generation capacity to power your facilities. It's just really essential, and I thank you all for being here today and continuing to work together to reach these very ambitious decarbonization goals that we need to achieve in order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said, Commissioner Phillips, and I would add, just as buyers and for corporations, don't shy away from the power that you hold. And we talked a lot in this panel today about barriers and some of the concerns we have, but focus on the opportunities and the things that actually are in place to support the path forward and progress. And I started with a statement about what we need to do versus how we need to get there. And so I would just say, as you work fast, be bold within your organizations and ask questions, build relationships with, again, I'm from the corporate giving department at General Motors. I'm not in energy procurement or, on-site power, anything related to that. And our energy team has come to me to say, we want to do this, we want to build equity into our processes. And you have relationships with community stakeholders that have opinions and thoughts and experience in this space. How can we work together to bring that all to the surface and move forward? And so I would encourage all of you to be bold within your companies and build relationships and take the same sense of urgency we have to decarbonize and apply that to bringing everybody along on the journey.
I'd have to echo my fellow panelists. Like, you guys have amazing power, and I would say lean into your voices on clean energy procurement and demanding that. Just go hard on that, because the choices we make today, any choice we make today, has ripple effects for generations. And you have the power to demand things with clean energy that can positively benefit communities, can positively benefit society. As Commissioner Phillips was mentioning, our historical infrastructure and what we're built on, you have the opportunity to understand what those are and make changes in your demands. So I would say, go hard.
I love it. Thank you to all our panelists. I think we have a really good sense of reminders of our past. Go slow, but keep going forward. Go with intention. Think and listen, and really bring in additional parties, and be bold. I love that. So with that, later today, you'll have the opportunity to join Beyond the Megawatt sessions, both in the next few minutes and on through the day. And I encourage you to keep these messages in mind as you spend the next few hours learning and figuring out how to collaborate for these solutions. So thank you again to panelists, and really appreciate your time today.